Have you ever had your heart broken by the one person you trusted the most? What if the one you loved, the person you were about to marry, betrayed you in a way that shattered everything you thought was real? It's a sunny Saturday afternoon, and Emma stands before a mirror in the bridal shop, dressed in a white wedding gown that shimmers in the soft light. She runs a trembling hand over the smooth fabric, admiring how it falls around her like a dream. The soft hum of voices and laughter from the bridal party floats in from the hallway, but it all seems so distant now. Emma exhales, trying to steady her racing heart. Her wedding day is supposed to be the happiest day of her life. But somehow, despite the joy that should fill her, there's an unsettling feeling deep within her chest. She looks at herself one last time, wondering if she's ready for this, wondering if everything will truly be perfect. After all, this isn't just about the dress, the flowers, or the cake. It's about Ryan, her fiancé, the man she's about to spend the rest of her life with. But why does it feel like something is off? Emma feels the tension coil in her stomach, a gnawing doubt that has been growing for weeks. She brushes it aside, telling herself it's just pre-wedding nerves. She's been looking forward to this moment for so long. Ryan, charming Ryan, is the love of her life, the man who swept her off her feet when they met in college. He'd supported her through the toughest times, made her laugh when she thought she couldn't, and always made her feel like she was enough. So why does she feel like her heart is 1,000 miles away from where it should be? Ryan and his family are out in the hallway, getting ready for the rehearsal dinner. Emma knows that her dad is down there, too, likely talking to Ryan's parents, making small talk as they finalize the details for the big day. Everything is in place: the flowers, the food, the seating arrangements. The excitement should be palpable. And yet, Emma feels a deep unease in her gut that no amount of distractions can wash away. She takes one last look at herself in the mirror and adjusts her veil, the delicate lace brushing her face like a soft whisper. It's all supposed to be perfect. But then, just as she turns to leave the dressing room, she hears the unmistakable voice of Ryan's sister, Ashley, echo down the hallway. Emma pauses, her heart skipping a beat. There's something in Ashley's tone, something mocking, something dismissive. I still can't believe Emma expects us to pretend like her mother was some kind of saint. Ashley laughs, her voice high-pitched with an edge of cruelty. I mean, really, what kind of mother would just leave her daughter behind like that? The words hit Emma like a punch to the gut. She freezes, unable to move, her mind racing as she processes what she just heard. Was that a joke? A comment made in passing, perhaps? But the venom in Ashley's voice says otherwise. This wasn't just a careless remark, it was deliberate, a cruel jab at the woman who had meant everything to Emma. Her mother. Emma's breath catches in her throat. Her mother, who had passed away just a few years ago, leaving a hole in her heart that would never fully heal. Her mother, who had loved her unconditionally, who had always been her rock, her inspiration, and her guiding light. To hear Ashley, someone who was about to become a part of her family, mock her memory, it was more than Emma could bear. The tears well up before she can stop them. Emma's hand trembles as she wipes her eyes, trying to regain control. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't the day for something like this. But as she stands there in front of the mirror, the reality of the situation hits her. This wasn't just an isolated incident. No, there had been signs of tension for weeks now, subtle jabs from Ryan's family, offhand comments about how Emma's mother had held her back, or how she should get over it already. But Emma had brushed it all off. She had told herself that once they were married, everything would change. She'd be part of their family. She'd belong. But now, standing here, she realizes how wrong she was. She had thought she was marrying Ryan, the man who had always been by her side, who had promised to love her and support her for the rest of their lives. But now she wasn't so sure. She wasn't sure of anything anymore. Emma takes a deep breath, fighting to steady her emotions. She can't do this. She can't let this destroy her moment. She had worked too hard to get here, had dreamed of this day for so long. But the truth is, Ryan's family had never respected her. They had always seen her as an outsider, someone who didn't fit into their perfect little world. And now Ashley had taken it too far. Her thoughts race as she walks slowly toward the door, each step heavy with the weight of the decision she's about to make. She can hear Ryan's laughter echoing in the hallway, his voice mingling with the voices of his family. They don't know. They don't understand. To them, it's just another joke, another harmless comment. But Emma can't ignore it anymore. She pushes open the door, stepping into the hallway, her face pale and her heart racing. She sees Ryan standing near the door to the rehearsal dinner, smiling at something his father has said. His eyes light up when he sees her, and for a brief moment, everything feels like it should again. But the tightness in her chest tells her otherwise. "Hey, babe," Ryan says, his voice warm and familiar. "You look amazing. Everything okay?" Emma looks at him, and for a moment, she just stands there, unsure of what to say. How could she explain what had just happened? How could she explain the betrayal she felt from the very people who were supposed to support her? I need to talk to you," she says quietly, her voice trembling. She feels the lump in her throat, but pushes it aside, forcing herself to focus. "It's about your sister." The smile fades from Ryan's face as he notices the change in her expression. "What's wrong?" Emma pauses, the words catching in her throat. "She mocked my mother, Ryan." He looks at her, confusion in his eyes. "What?" "No, that doesn't sound like her." "No," Emma cuts him off, her voice now rising with emotion. "It's true. I heard her. I heard everything." Ryan steps closer, reaching out to touch her arm. Okay, let's calm down. "I'm sure it wasn't that bad." But Emma pulls away from him, her heart breaking in that instant. "No, Ryan. It was bad. And you don't even realize it. Your family doesn't respect me, doesn't respect my mother, and I can't just pretend that everything is fine anymore." Ryan's face falls, and he opens his mouth to speak, but Emma can't wait for him to find the right words. "I can't marry you," she whispers, her voice barely audible. The words hit like a slap in the face. And in that moment, everything changes. The wedding she had dreamed of, the life she thought she would build with him, shattered in the blink of an eye. Emma turns and walks away, not knowing what comes next, but knowing that this is the only choice she has left. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Emma had always been a dreamer. As a little girl, she would spend hours imagining what her future would look like, where she would go to college, what kind of job she would have, and who she would marry. She often envisioned herself in a world where everything felt right, where love was unbreakable, and where her mother was always there to guide her through life's ups and downs. But life, as it often does, had a way of turning those dreams upside down. Emma's mother, Charlotte, had been everything to her. She was a vibrant, loving woman who had always put her family first. Emma remembered how her mother would sit with her at the kitchen table, helping her with schoolwork, or how she would braid Emma's hair in the mornings before school. Charlotte was the kind of person who made everyone around her feel special, whether it was through a warm smile or a small act of kindness. But when Emma was just 12 years old, everything changed. Charlotte was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer that quickly took over her body. The doctors said it was aggressive, that it would take everything from her in a matter of months. Emma didn't understand it at the time. She couldn't comprehend how her mother, this pillar of strength in her life, could be so vulnerable, so fragile. She spent countless nights lying awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for her mother to get better. But deep down, Emma knew that things would never be the same. In the end, Charlotte passed away after a brutal battle with the disease. Emma's world fell apart. Her father, Tom, did his best to comfort her, but he was a broken man himself, unsure of how to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. He had lost the love of his life, and now he was trying to raise Emma on his own, something he'd never been prepared for. It wasn't easy. The grief weighed heavily on them both. But Emma's father tried to give her the best life he could. He encouraged her to pursue her dreams, to go to college and make a life for herself, just as her mother had always hoped. Even though he struggled with his own sorrow, he never stopped trying to show Emma that there was still beauty in life, even in the face of so much loss. As Emma grew older, she found solace in her studies, in books, and in her friendships. She didn't realize it at the time, but her mother's passing had shaped her into the woman she was becoming. A woman who valued love, loyalty, and the importance of family above all else. Emma had always been fiercely independent, but she also longed for the kind of love her parents had shared, the kind that was unconditional and forever. When she met Ryan in college, it felt like everything had finally fallen into place. He was kind, intelligent, and had a way of making her feel safe. They met at a campus party during their sophomore year, and within weeks, Emma found herself falling for him. He had this quiet confidence about him that made her feel like she could conquer the world. He was everything she had ever wanted in a partner, someone who could balance her dreamer tendencies with his practical outlook on life. Their relationship had progressed naturally, each day bringing them closer together. They spent long hours talking about their hopes and dreams, and Ryan always made her feel heard. He listened to her talk about her mother, about how much she missed her, and how she wished her mother could have been there to see her graduate. He never once judged her for her sadness, always offering a gentle, understanding ear. As the years went by, Emma began to picture a future with Ryan. She saw them in a cozy house, with children running around, their own family to love and care for. She imagined Ryan's laughter filling their home, just as her father's had, and she pictured herself raising her children with the same love and care that Charlotte had given her. When Ryan proposed, it felt like a dream come true. He had taken her to their favorite cafe, where they'd shared countless cups of coffee and long conversations. With a simple question, "Will you marry me?" he had sealed their future together. Emma had said yes without hesitation, her heart bursting with love for him. But now, standing in front of the mirror, Emma couldn't help but feel that all of it, the love, the dreams, the future, was slipping away. Her mother's memory had always been a cherished part of her life, and it was something she had carried with her through every step of her journey. The idea of building a family with Ryan had always been wrapped up in the thought that they would both honor her mother's legacy, that they would create something beautiful in her memory. But what she had just overheard, the cruel words from Ryan's sister, Ashley, had shattered that vision. Emma stood there, staring at herself in the mirror, trying to hold back tears. She wasn't sure who she was anymore. Was she still the girl who had lost her mother at such a young age? Or was she becoming someone else, someone who was willing to ignore the hurt, ignore the disrespect, for the sake of keeping the peace? She thought she was stronger than that. She thought she had learned how to stand up for herself. But now, as the memory of those mocking words echoed in her mind, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something had been lost that could never be found again. Her mother, who had always taught her the importance of love and respect, would never have allowed such cruelty to slide by unnoticed. And Emma couldn't, either. She had always prided herself on being independent and strong, but Ryan's family had crossed a line that no amount of compromise could ever make right. Emma had always dreamed of a future filled with love, a future where her mother's memory was honored, where she could look back and feel proud of the life she had built. But now she wasn't so sure anymore. Ryan had always been her rock, the one person who understood her deepest fears and dreams. But if his family could treat her mother's memory with such disdain, could she really spend the rest of her life with him? Could she really marry into a family that didn't understand her pain, her love, Her grief? The wedding was only days away, and Emma was standing at a crossroads. She had to make a choice, not just for herself, but for the memory of her mother. Could she let go of the dream she had built with Ryan? Could she walk away from a life she had always imagined? But the answer, as difficult as it was to admit, seemed to come to her in that quiet, aching moment. No, she couldn't do it. She couldn't marry someone who didn't understand her, someone who didn't understand the importance of family, love, and respect. Emma wiped away the tear that had fallen down her cheek, and for the first time in a long while, she felt the weight of what she had to do. The tension between Emma and Ryan had been brewing for days. Since overhearing Ashley's cruel remarks about her late mother, Emma had been struggling to contain her emotions. She tried to convince herself it was just a misunderstanding, that maybe Ashley hadn't meant it the way it sounded. But the more she thought about it, the angrier she became. The words weren't an accident. They were intentional, meant to wound her, and they had. The next few days leading up to the wedding were filled with forced smiles and strained conversations. Every time Emma looked at Ryan, she felt a growing distance between them. The man she thought she knew so well, the man she was about to marry, now seemed like a stranger. She couldn't shake the feeling that the family she was about to join didn't respect her, and worse, they didn't respect her mother. Emma tried to push these thoughts aside, telling herself that her love for Ryan should be enough to get past this. She told herself that every family had their quirks, their flaws. After all, Ryan had always been so kind to her. But each day, as the wedding approached, she found it harder to ignore the nagging doubts in her mind. She had always imagined a wedding day filled with joy and warmth, a day where she would feel surrounded by love, not just from Ryan, but from both of their families. Her mother had always dreamed of seeing Emma walk down the aisle, and the thought of that moment being tainted by the ugly comments from Ryan's family seemed unbearable. On the morning of the rehearsal dinner, Emma decided she couldn't keep quiet anymore. She had to confront Ryan about what she had overheard, no matter how difficult it might be. It was the only way to move forward, to clear the air before they took the next step in their relationship. The rehearsal dinner was being held at a small local restaurant. The warm glow of the dimmed lights and the buzz of conversations filled the air as everyone gathered around the large table. Emma stood off to the side, watching Ryan interact with his family, laughing and chatting as if everything were normal. But to Emma, nothing felt normal. Her father was there, of course, seated next to Ryan's parents. The two men seemed to get along well enough, exchanging pleasantries as they shared a glass of wine. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling of being on the outside, looking in. She had always felt a little disconnected from Ryan's family, but tonight, the gap between them seemed wider than ever. Ashley was sitting at the end of the table, her eyes flicking between Ryan and Emma as she sipped her drink, a small smirk playing at the corners of her lips. Emma could feel her gaze burning into her, the tension palpable. Ryan was oblivious to it all, too caught up in the conversation to notice the discomfort that was building inside Emma. She took a deep breath and walked over to Ryan, who was talking to his father. She placed a hand gently on his shoulder, and he turned to her with a warm smile. "Hey, babe, what's up?" he asked, his voice light. Emma's heart pounded as she gathered her thoughts. "We need to talk," she said, her voice quieter than she intended. Ryan frowned, sensing the change in her tone. "Sure. What's wrong?" Emma hesitated. She glanced at his parents, who were deep in conversation with her father, and then at Ashley, who was still watching them from across the room. She could feel the weight of their scrutiny, but she couldn't ignore the truth any longer. "It's about your sister," Emma began, her voice trembling slightly. "What I overheard, what she said about my mom," she stopped herself, swallowing hard. The words caught in her throat, but she had to say them. "It was cruel, Ryan. She mocked my mom, and it hurt more than you can imagine." Ryan's expression shifted from confusion to concern, and he immediately took her hand, his grip firm. Emma, I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding. Ashley can be, well, she can be a little harsh at times, but she didn't mean it like that. I'm sure she didn't. Emma felt a wave of frustration wash over her. She had hoped that Ryan would understand her pain, that he would stand up for her. But instead, it seemed like he was brushing her feelings aside. I heard it with my own ears, Ryan, she said, her voice growing steadier as she spoke. She was mocking my mom, making fun of her for passing away. How could you not see that? How can you just excuse it like it's nothing? Ryan stepped back slightly, his brows furrowed. Emma, please, don't do this right now, he said, glancing nervously around the room. Not at the rehearsal dinner. It's not the time for this. It's never the time for this, Ryan, Emma shot back, her heart racing with the hurt that had been building for days. You've been avoiding this conversation, and I can't pretend anymore. I can't marry into a family that doesn't respect me, that doesn't respect my mother. You have no idea what it's like to lose someone like that and then hear people talk about them like they're a joke. For the first time, Emma saw Ryan's expression falter. The warm, loving smile that usually greeted her was gone, replaced by confusion and a trace of defensiveness. He opened his mouth to say something, but before he could speak, Ashley's voice cut through the tension. What's going on here? Why so serious? Ashley's tone was light, but there was an edge to it that made Emma's blood run cold. Emma turned toward Ashley, her heart pounding. You know exactly what's going on. I heard what you said about my mom. Ashley looked at her, feigning innocence. Oh, please. It was just a joke. You're being way too sensitive about it. Everyone knows that your mom wasn't exactly a saint, right? Emma felt like the ground had been ripped out from under her. How could Ashley say something like that? She had just given Ryan the benefit of the doubt, but now she realized it was all futile. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a clear message from his family about where they stood. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not now. Not in front of all these people. She could feel the anger and pain burning inside her, but she wouldn't let Ashley see her break. I'm done, Emma whispered, her voice trembling. I can't do this. I can't marry you, Ryan. The room went quiet. Emma's words hung in the air like a heavy weight, suffocating the light-hearted atmosphere that had been there just moments ago. Ryan looked at her, his face a mixture of shock and disbelief. What? He asked, barely a whisper. I'm done, Emma repeated, louder this time. I can't marry into a family that doesn't respect me or my mother. This wedding is off. As the words left her mouth, Emma turned on her heel and walked away, her heart pounding with every step. The cold air of the night hit Emma like a slap as she stepped outside the restaurant. The sound of voices, murmurs, gasps, the distant clink of glasses faded as she walked further away, her footsteps sharp and deliberate. The chaos of the rehearsal dinner, the stares, the shock on Ryan's face, it all felt like a distant memory now. She couldn't breathe. Not because of the cold, but because she had just done the one thing she never thought she would. She had called off her wedding. The thing she had worked toward for years, the life she had dreamed about with Ryan, was suddenly slipping away like sand through her fingers. The weight of her decision was suffocating. But in that suffocating feeling, there was also something else, a strange, yet undeniable sense of freedom. She could feel her heart racing, her chest tight with emotions she couldn't entirely name. But somehow, even though she was terrified, even though she felt like she had broken everything, there was a relief. The weight she'd been carrying had been lifted, even if only for a moment. Emma walked toward the small park nearby, her feet crunching over the frosty grass. She couldn't stay there, couldn't be around Ryan, his family, or even her own father. Not yet. She needed space to breathe, to process what she had just done, and to understand what it all meant. Ryan would never understand. He had never truly seen how much Charlotte meant to her. Maybe it was unfair of her to expect him to. After all, Ryan had never lost his mother. He had never felt the earth-shattering grief of watching someone you love slip away so quickly, so irreversibly. How could he understand? How could he know that for Emma, her mother was more than a memory? She was a part of every breath she took, a part of every dream she had for her future. But the problem wasn't just Ryan. It was his family. They had never understood, not once. And even worse, they hadn't cared to understand. Ashley's cruel words were the breaking point, but they had been building for years. From the snide remarks about Emma's mother to the way they'd always dismissed her pain, Emma had never felt truly welcomed by them. And now that lack of respect had exposed itself in the worst possible way, just days before the wedding. Emma sank onto a bench in the park, her hands wrapped tightly around her coat. Her mind raced with a million thoughts. Should she have handled it differently? Was there any way to salvage this? Was Ryan even worth salvaging? She reached for her phone and scrolled through the recent texts from Ryan. There were dozens of them, messages asking her where she was, if she was okay, begging her to come back to the dinner, to talk. She couldn't bring herself to respond. Not yet. She didn't know what to say. And the truth was, she didn't even know who she was anymore. She had built her life around this wedding, around the dream of a future with Ryan. Now that dream was gone, shattered in one moment of brutal honesty. A sound from behind her made Emma freeze. She turned, half expecting to see Ryan standing there, his face filled with confusion and hurt. But it wasn't Ryan. It was her father, Tom, walking toward her with his hands in his pockets and a quiet concern in his eyes. "Hey," he said softly, taking a seat next to her on the bench. "Mind if I sit down?" Emma smiled weakly, trying to hide the tears that threatened to spill. She shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "I couldn't stay there. It's over, Dad. I called off the wedding." Her father didn't say anything at first. He simply sat next to her, his presence warm and comforting. Emma could feel his eyes on her, but he didn't push her to explain right away. He understood her need for silence. He understood, better than anyone, that sometimes words couldn't convey the depth of the pain. Finally, after a long pause, he spoke. "I'm proud of you, Emma. I know that probably doesn't make sense right now, but I am. That wasn't an easy thing to do. But I think deep down, you knew it wasn't right." Emma blinked, the tears she had been holding back finally escaping. She let out a shaky breath, her voice trembling. "But I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought Ryan and I were meant to be together. I wanted so badly for it to work, for him to be the one who understood me." "Who understood my mom?" "I know, honey," Tom said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "But sometimes, the people we think we're supposed to be with aren't the ones who are meant to love us in the way we need. And sometimes, the hardest thing we can do is walk away from something that doesn't serve us, even when it feels like it's the end of the world." "I don't know if I'm strong enough for this," Emma admitted, her voice breaking. "What if I've ruined everything? What if Ryan never forgives me? What if I made the wrong choice?" Her father squeezed her shoulder gently. "Emma, you're stronger than you think. And this isn't about what Ryan will forgive. It's about you. You deserve to be loved the way you need to be loved, wholeheartedly, without conditions. And if someone can't see that, then maybe they're not the one for you." Emma nodded, wiping her eyes. She had always looked up to her father as a rock, a source of strength. But hearing him speak in this way gave her a new sense of clarity. It was as though she had been walking through a fog for so long, and now, suddenly, things were beginning to clear. "Do you think I made the right decision?" she asked quietly, turning to her father. "I think you did what you needed to do," he replied, his voice steady and sure. "And no matter what happens, you'll get through it." "You're not alone in this, Emma." Emma sat in silence for a moment, absorbing his words. There was a part of her that still wanted to run back to Ryan, to undo what she had just done. But deep inside, she knew it wasn't right. She wasn't ready to be with someone who didn't understand her pain, who couldn't honor the memory of the woman who had shaped her into who she was. As much as she loved Ryan, she couldn't ignore the truth that had been staring her in the face for so long. Love, at its core, was built on mutual respect. And respect was something that Ryan's family, and perhaps even Ryan himself, had never truly given her. The journey ahead would be hard. She didn't know what would come next, or if she would ever find the kind of love she had hoped for. But for the first time in a long time, Emma felt a glimmer of hope. The road would be difficult, but it would be hers to walk. And whatever came next, she would face it on her own terms. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The days following the breakup felt like a blur of numbness and quiet chaos. Emma had retreated into herself, pulling away from the world she once knew. Every phone call, every message from Ryan felt like a reminder of something she had lost, something she could never get back. But as the reality of her decision set in, she realized she had made the right choice no matter how much it hurt. At first, she couldn't even bring herself to respond to his messages. The thought of facing Ryan again, of explaining her reasons in a way that would make him understand, felt overwhelming. She wasn't sure if he would ever understand. And the truth was, she wasn't even sure if she cared anymore. Days turned into weeks, and Emma began to focus on healing, or at least, trying to. She threw herself into her work, taking on more projects than she had in months. She sought comfort in old hobbies she had long neglected, painting, reading, and walking in the quiet solitude of the parks she used to love. But despite her efforts to regain a sense of normalcy, something still gnawed at her, a deep ache in her chest. It wasn't the fact that the wedding was off, it was the loss of Ryan, the loss of the future she had imagined with him. She had spent years with him, planning a life, weaving together a dream that had now fallen apart. And for all of the emotional chaos and heartbreak, there was one thing that felt particularly unbearable: the weight of his family's rejection. Emma hadn't heard from Ashley since the night of the rehearsal dinner. She hadn't expected an apology from her, but the silence only added to the sting. What did Ashley think of her now? What did Ryan's parents think? Did they blame her for the breakup? Did they think she was overreacting? A week later, the silence was broken in a way Emma hadn't anticipated. It was a Wednesday evening, and she had just finished a long day at work. The rain pattered against her apartment window, and the glow of the streetlights outside cast a dim light across her living room. She was curled up on the couch with a cup of tea when her phone buzzed. It was a text from Ryan. "I know you're angry, Emma, and I know I haven't been the best at listening to you, but I want to understand. I can't move on from this without hearing your side. Please, just give me a chance to explain. I owe you that much. Let's talk." Ryan. She stared at the message for a long time, her fingers hovering over the screen. Part of her wanted to respond, to tell him everything that had been weighing on her heart. Part of her wanted to call him, to hear his voice and see if there was any way to make things right between them. But the fear of his family's reaction, the dread of reopening old wounds, held her back. Her heart ached as she thought about everything she had lost. She missed Ryan, his laughter, his warmth, the way he made her feel like she could conquer anything. But there was no way she could ignore the feeling that she was never truly understood by him. She had spent so long trying to make it work, trying to fit into a life that wasn't entirely hers. She put the phone down, rubbing her temples, trying to push through the flood of emotions. A part of her wanted closure, wanted answers. But another part, the part that had grown stronger since calling off the wedding, knew that some questions were better left unanswered. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Emma jolted, startled by the unexpected sound. She wasn't expecting anyone, she hadn't invited anyone over. But the persistence of the ring made her stand up and head toward the door, her heart racing. She opened it to find Ryan standing there, drenched from the rain, his face etched with a mixture of sadness and determination. "Ryan," Emma whispered, her breath catching in her throat. I had to see you, he said, his voice low but steady. I couldn't just send another text. I need to hear it from you. I need to know what happened, what went wrong. Emma stepped back, unsure of what to do or say. Her emotions were a whirlpool inside her, tugging at her every which way. Part of her wanted to slam the door, to send him away and move on with her life. But another part, a part she couldn't ignore, wanted to let him in. Come in, she said quietly, stepping aside to let him enter. They sat in the living room, the silence between them thick and uncomfortable. Ryan looked at her with those familiar eyes, the ones that had always made her feel safe, even in the most chaotic of times. But now they seemed distant, unsure. I'm sorry, Emma, Ryan began, his voice trembling slightly. I didn't understand. I thought I did, but I was wrong. I saw you hurting and I didn't know how to fix it. I thought if I ignored it, it would just go away. But I see now. I see how much it hurt you. And I'm sorry for not seeing that sooner. For not standing up for you. I should have. Emma bit her lip, trying to hold back the tears. Ryan was apologizing, and part of her wanted to believe him. But as his words washed over her, she realized there was something even more crucial he still didn't understand. He wasn't just apologizing for his actions, he was apologizing for a mistake that wasn't entirely his to fix. The core of the problem wasn't just him. It was everything. I wanted so badly for us to work, Ryan, Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. I loved you. But there's a part of me that felt like I was always fighting for something that wasn't mine to fight for. I fought for your love, for your family's respect, for something that I thought would make me whole. But in the end, I realized that I wasn't whole. I didn't even know who I was anymore. And I'm sorry too. I'm sorry I couldn't be what you wanted. But I can't go back to the way things were. I can't marry into a family that doesn't respect me, that doesn't respect my mother. Her words hung in the air, a painful silence following. Ryan didn't say anything for a long time, his gaze downcast, processing what she had just shared. I don't know if I can fix this, Ryan finally said, his voice thick with emotion. But I want to try, if you'll let me. Emma closed her eyes, feeling a flood of emotions she couldn't quite control. She had always thought that love meant fixing things, mending broken pieces. But in this moment, she realized that sometimes love meant letting go. I think we both need to heal, Ryan, Emma said softly, standing up and walking toward the window, her back to him. I don't know if there's anything to fix, but I know that I need to find myself first. And maybe someday, we'll both be better for it. But for now, we need to walk separate paths. With a heavy heart, Emma turned to face him one last time. I hope you find happiness, Ryan. And with that, she watched him walk out the door, closing it softly behind her. The days that followed felt like a slow healing process. Emma didn't know exactly how to begin, but she knew that the first step was to reclaim her life, to reconnect with the woman she had been before the wedding plans, before Ryan, before the world had turned upside down. For the first time in months, she felt a strange sense of calm, as if the storm that had raged inside her was beginning to settle. She focused on herself, on the things she had long neglected. Work was a welcome distraction, but it was more than that. The steady rhythm of her days, the focus on tasks she could control, gave her a sense of peace she hadn't felt in ages. Emma also found herself spending more time with her father, Tom, who had been her quiet rock through all of this. They had long conversations about life, love, and loss, but most of all, about moving forward. One afternoon, after an especially long workday, Emma sat at her desk at home, staring out the window as the sun dipped low, casting a soft orange glow over the city. She took a deep breath, letting the weight of everything wash over her, and picked up her phone. Her finger hovered over Ryan's number for a moment, but she didn't press call. Instead, she hit delete, deleting every message he had sent over the past few weeks, every hope, every wish for reconciliation. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a significant step forward. She wasn't sure what the future held, but in this moment, she knew that her journey was no longer tied to Ryan. She had learned something through the heartbreak, that sometimes the hardest thing to do is also the most necessary, letting go. It was just after dinner one evening, a couple of weeks after Ryan had left her apartment, when she decided to take a walk in the park near her home. The leaves on the trees were beginning to change colors, signaling the arrival of autumn, and she felt a quiet peace in the air as she strolled along the winding path. The park was mostly empty, save for a few joggers and the occasional dog walker. Emma found a bench and sat, letting the soft sounds of the evening settle around her. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to feel her grief fully. She thought about her mother, about the times they had spent together, about the quiet moments that had shaped her into who she was. She could feel her mother's presence with her, comforting her in the way only a mother could. Emma smiled faintly, thinking about how much her mother had loved the fall, how they used to take walks just like this, talking about life and dreams. It was in moments like this that Emma realized her mother's spirit would never truly leave her. Her mother was a part of her, always had been, and always would be. That love, that connection, wasn't something she could ever lose. As the evening grew darker, Emma made her way home, her mind quieter than it had been in weeks. She had so much to process, so much to figure out, but for the first time, she didn't feel overwhelmed by it. She knew she was on the right path. She was learning how to live for herself, not for anyone else. The next day, Emma met up with Sophie, her best friend, at a local coffee shop. Sophie had been a constant support throughout everything, and Emma knew that she could count on her to help sort through the mess that was still lingering in her heart. "Are you okay?" Sophie asked, her eyes soft with concern as they settled into a booth, sipping their drinks. Emma nodded, taking a moment before speaking. "Yeah, I think I am. I'm starting to understand that it's okay to let go. I don't need to hold on to something that isn't right for me anymore." Sophie's expression softened, and she reached out, placing her hand over Emma's. "You're so strong, Em. You've been through so much and you're still standing. I'm proud of you." Emma smiled faintly, feeling a warmth in her chest. "I don't feel strong. I feel lost, in a way." "It's okay to feel lost," Sophie said gently. "You're finding yourself again. It's going to take time, but you've already come so far. And you're not alone. You've got me. You've got your dad. And most importantly, you've got yourself." Emma thought about that. She hadn't really thought about it in those terms before. She had always thought of herself in relation to others: Ryan, her family, her friends. But now, in the quiet of this conversation, Emma realized that she had always been enough. She just hadn't let herself believe it. "I've been thinking a lot about what I want moving forward," Emma said, her voice gaining strength. "I think I want to travel. I want to experience the world in a way I never could before. I want to be free, in a way that I haven't allowed myself to be in so long." Sophie's eyes lit up, her smile wide. "That sounds amazing. You deserve it. You deserve to do whatever makes you happy. And if that means going on an adventure, then do it." Emma grinned, feeling the first stirrings of excitement since the breakup. She wasn't ready to move on in the traditional sense, not yet. But the thought of embracing the world, exploring new places, meeting new people, it felt like the freedom she had been craving. "I think I'm going to start planning," Emma said, her voice firm with newfound resolve. "There's a whole world out there waiting for me, and I'm going to take it on, one step at a time." As Emma looked out the window, watching the world continue its steady pace outside, she felt a surge of optimism. Yes, her life had been shattered in a way she couldn't have predicted, but in the ashes of that broken dream, something new was beginning to take shape. Something better. She had learned the hardest lesson of all, that in order to live authentically, she needed to live for herself, to honor the woman she was, and to allow herself the space to grow and heal. The journey was only just beginning. And this time, Emma was ready. The following weeks were a blur of activity as Emma took the first tentative steps toward a new chapter in her life. She spent her days planning, sorting out her emotions, and researching destinations. The thought of traveling to distant places, seeing the world beyond her apartment and the city she had always known, filled her with an excitement she hadn't felt in years. It was as though the world had suddenly become full of possibilities, each one more enticing than the last. She started small, taking a weekend trip to the coast with Sophie. They stayed in a charming bed and breakfast by the beach, where they spent their days walking along the shore, talking about life and reminiscing about the past. It was refreshing to be away from the weight of everything that had happened. It was just Emma and Sophie, surrounded by the endless sea and a sky so big it made Emma feel both small and incredibly free. "I've missed this," Emma said one morning, gazing out at the ocean. "Just being here with you. It's like I can finally breathe again." Sophie's smile was warm, and she reached out to squeeze Emma's hand. "This is only the beginning, Em. You're going to do so much more than just breathe. You're going to live. Fully. For you." Emma let out a slow, contented sigh, letting the waves' rhythmic sound calm her mind. She had spent so much time focused on what she had lost that she had forgotten how to appreciate what she still had: her health, her freedom, her ability to create new dreams for herself. She didn't have all the answers, but she was starting to see that maybe that was okay. The future was a vast, open canvas, and Emma was holding the brush. When she returned home, Emma found herself more determined than ever to carve out the life she wanted. She enrolled in a course that had always intrigued her but had never felt practical enough to pursue while planning her future with Ryan. It was a photography class, one that would teach her to look at the world through a different lens. The thought of capturing moments, of finding beauty in the ordinary, felt like a way to connect to herself in a way she never had before. One evening, while perusing a local art gallery, Emma overheard a conversation between two women in front of a photograph she admired. The image was of a street in a foreign city, bathed in golden light. The photograph captured the essence of adventure, of possibilities unfolding with each step. "You know," one of the women said, "I've always wanted to travel more, but I can never find the time. Maybe once my kids are older." "I don't know." The other woman laughed softly. "Time is never going to be perfect. You have to make it. If you don't, you'll just keep waiting." Emma listened, struck by the simplicity yet depth of the words. "If you don't, you'll just keep waiting." She had spent so long waiting for the right moment, the right circumstances, the right partner, the right job. But now she realized there was never going to be a perfect moment. There was only this moment right now. That night, after returning to her apartment, Emma made a decision. She was going to start living for herself, on her own terms, no more waiting for the stars to align. She wasn't sure where the road would lead, but for the first time in a long time, she was excited to see what came next. The next morning, Emma booked a flight to Spain. She had always dreamed of seeing Barcelona, of wandering through the narrow streets, eating tapas in small cafes, and watching the sunset from a rooftop. It felt like the right place to begin her journey, not just across the world, but into the next phase of her life. But as much as she felt her life starting to shift, there was still a shadow in her heart that she couldn't shake. Ryan. She thought about him often, not with regret, but with an ache that seemed to tug at her, especially in the quiet moments when she allowed herself to reflect. There had been so much love, so many memories, and while she was moving on, part of her still felt the sting of that loss. She couldn't help but wonder about Ryan's life now, how he was coping, whether he had found peace. Emma didn't know if they'd ever cross paths again, but she hoped that, in time, they would both heal and find the happiness they deserved. She wasn't sure what that meant for their future, but she knew she needed to focus on her own. A month later, Emma was standing at the gates of the Barcelona airport, her heart racing with excitement. The air was thick with the smell of the sea, the sound of foreign languages mixing with the hum of bustling crowds. She felt a rush of anticipation. For the first time in years, she was in the middle of an adventure, alone, yet not lonely. Her first day in the city was a blur of wonder. She wandered down the famous Las Ramblas, taking in the vibrant street performers, the flower stalls, and the cafes lining the streets. She marveled at the architecture, the way the light fell on the old stone buildings, the way the city seemed to pulse with life. As she sat at a cafe in the late afternoon, sipping on a glass of sangria, she felt a sense of belonging, a feeling that had been missing for so long. She was no longer defined by the things she had lost. She was becoming the person she had always wanted to be, someone who could find joy in the moment, someone who was free to follow her own path. The trip was everything Emma had hoped for and more. She took photographs of everything, the colorful markets, the quiet alleys, the people she met along the way. And with each snapshot, she felt herself growing, discovering parts of herself that had been buried for years. One evening, as Emma sat on a bench overlooking the Mediterranean, the sun sinking low in the sky, she thought back on everything she had gone through, the pain of the breakup, the heartbreak of losing Ryan, the uncertainty of the future. And yet, here she was, standing on her own 2 feet, stronger and more confident than ever before. She realized something in that moment. This was just the beginning. She had been through so much, and yet she had come out the other side not broken, but whole. And the journey ahead was hers to navigate. No one could define it for her. She had learned that love wasn't about fitting into someone else's life. It was about finding the strength to create your own. And with that, Emma smiled to herself, knowing that the future, whatever it held, would be hers to shape. Life in Barcelona continued to be everything Emma had hoped for and more. Each day was a new adventure, whether she was getting lost in the maze of narrow alleys, snapping photos of the vibrant street art, or sitting in bustling cafes, watching the world go by. The city felt alive, and she felt more alive than she had in months. Her heart, once heavy with sadness, now felt lighter, as if the weight of the past was slowly but surely lifting from her shoulders. She spent her days exploring, discovering hidden gems throughout the city, local art galleries, charming bookstores, and cafes with views of the sea. The excitement of being in a new place, of carving out a space just for herself, was invigorating. There was something about being away from her old life that gave her a sense of clarity. But despite the joy and freedom that this new chapter offered, Emma couldn't escape the occasional nagging thought. Her heart still ached for the person she used to be, the person who had been part of Ryan's world. There were days when she would catch herself wondering what Ryan was doing, how he was coping without her, if he thought about her as often as she thought about him. She quickly shoved those thoughts aside, reminding herself that she was in the process of moving on. But still, they lingered in the back of her mind like uninvited guests. One chilly evening, just a few weeks into her trip, Emma was walking along the beach when she felt her phone buzz in her pocket. She pulled it out, expecting it to be Sophie, sending a funny meme or checking in on her travels. But when she saw the name on the screen, her stomach dropped. It was Ryan. Her hand hesitated over the screen. She hadn't spoken to him since the day he left. His family's cruel behavior still stung, and Emma wasn't sure she was ready to face him, not after everything that had happened. But her curiosity got the best of her. She opened the message. "Ryan, I know it's been a while, but I've been thinking a lot about you lately. I know I messed up, and I can't stop regretting the way things ended. I miss you, Emma. I don't know what the future holds, but I'd like to talk if you're open to it." Emma's heart raced, and her mind swirled with conflicting emotions. It had been so long since she'd heard from him, and the vulnerability in his message took her by surprise. She hadn't expected him to reach out, especially not after everything that had happened. But the truth was, she wasn't sure if she was ready for this. She had spent so much time healing, moving forward, learning to love herself again. Could she open that door again, especially after the way his family had treated her? After everything he had said when they broke up? She stared at the message for a long time, feeling torn. She had so many questions, so many things she wanted to say to him. But she wasn't sure if that was the right path to take anymore. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and decided to step away for a moment. There was no rush. She didn't have to respond immediately. Emma wanted to think this through, to give herself the space to decide what was best for her, not for him, not for anyone else, but for her. The following days were filled with reflection. Emma continued to explore Barcelona, allowing the beauty of the city to soothe her and ground her. She spent more time with her camera, taking photos of the streets and landscapes, immersing herself in her art. The longer she thought about Ryan's message, the more certain she became that she wasn't ready to reopen that door. She had come so far, and she didn't want to go back to the place of uncertainty, of heartbreak. Still, there was a part of her that felt guilty for shutting him out so completely. She had once loved him deeply, and the idea of cutting him off without any explanation weighed on her. What if they could have a conversation that would give them both the closure they needed? But as she sat in a quiet park one afternoon, watching the locals go about their daily routines, Emma realized that closure wasn't something she needed from Ryan. It wasn't about fixing what was broken or seeking answers to the questions that still lingered. The closure, she realized, had to come from within herself. She had already healed. She had already moved forward. The past was just that, the past. So, after a few more days of quiet contemplation, Emma decided to send him a message. It wasn't the answer he had hoped for, but it was the answer she needed. Emma, Ryan, I appreciate you reaching out, and I'm glad to hear that you've been reflecting on things. But I've come to realize that I need to keep moving forward, and I can't go back to the way things were. I'm sorry, but I think it's best we let the past stay in the past. I wish you nothing but the best. The message felt final, but there was a sense of peace that came with it. She had made her decision. It wasn't about anger or bitterness. It was about accepting that some things were just meant to end. And sometimes, the best way to honor the love that once existed between two people was to let it go. As Emma put her phone down, she felt the weight lift from her shoulders. It was time to move forward, with no regrets, no looking back. The next morning, Emma woke early and made her way to a quiet cafe she had discovered on a side street the day before. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air as she sat down with her camera, ready to capture another piece of the world around her. She smiled softly to herself, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction and unspoken understanding that her journey was hers alone, and she was in charge of where it led. There was so much more to experience, so much more to discover. She had no idea what the future held, but one thing was certain: she was ready for it. And for the first time in a long time, Emma was fully at peace with the present. As the weeks in Barcelona passed, Emma's sense of freedom deepened. The city had begun to feel like home in a way that no place had ever felt before. Her days were filled with photography, long walks through the streets, and quiet moments of self-reflection. It was as if each day was an opportunity to create something new for herself, a new version of her life that didn't carry the weight of the past. Despite the peace she was slowly carving out, Emma couldn't ignore the stirring of new possibilities. The world felt open in ways she hadn't realized before. As she stood on the roof of her apartment one evening, watching the sun set over the city's skyline, a thought crossed her mind, one that would change everything. What if I could stay here? What if I could build a life in a place that had become so much more than a getaway? It had always been Emma's dream to live abroad, to immerse herself in a different culture, and Barcelona had offered her the perfect escape. But now, the idea of leaving seemed less like a temporary adventure and more like the next step in her life. She had spent so much time trying to fit into the world she'd known back home, with its expectations and constraints, but here, away from everything familiar, she could truly be herself. The idea of starting fresh in a place where she wasn't defined by her past, by Ryan or anyone else, felt like a breath of fresh air. Emma had a decision to make, but she didn't want to rush it. She still needed to process what it meant to truly leave her old life behind. Still, the thought was tantalizing. She had already begun making connections with locals, friends she had met through photography classes, and she was starting to get involved in the community. But what did it really mean to uproot her life completely? Her inner turmoil continued as she navigated her feelings. Every conversation with Sophie was a mixture of excitement for what was to come and fear of the unknown. While her friend supported Emma's decision to move forward in whatever way she saw fit, Emma could feel the uncertainty lingering in her own heart. It was during one of these conversations that Sophie dropped a bombshell. "I'm coming to visit you," Sophie said, her tone light but with an underlying seriousness. "I need a break from everything, and I want to see you. You've made such a beautiful life for yourself here, and I want to experience it too." Emma's heart skipped a beat. Sophie had been one of her biggest supporters from the beginning, and now the thought of having her friend by her side in this new chapter felt like just what Emma needed to clarify her next steps. "I can't wait to show you everything," Emma said, her voice full of enthusiasm she hadn't realized she'd been missing. "We'll explore the city together, eat all the food, and I'll finally introduce you to the people I've met here. It'll be amazing." Sophie arrived 2 weeks later, and the reunion was everything Emma had hoped for. The two of them spent their days laughing, wandering the streets of the city, eating tapas, and taking photos together. It was like no time had passed, even though Emma had changed so much since the last time they were together. She felt herself coming alive again, like she was rediscovering parts of herself she'd forgotten. But amidst the joy of Sophie's visit, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming. She had gotten so comfortable in Barcelona, surrounded by the bustling energy of the city and the promise of a fresh start. Yet, she was torn. Every time she thought about making the decision to stay permanently, her heart raced with excitement and fear in equal measure. Could she really build a new life here? Was it the right move, or was she running away from something she couldn't escape? One evening, after a long day of exploring, Sophie and Emma sat on a bench overlooking the sparkling lights of the city. The cool breeze carried the scent of the sea, and the stars above seemed to twinkle just for them. "I've been thinking about something," Emma said, her voice hesitant. "I love it here. I mean, I've never felt more alive, more at peace with who I am. But I don't know if I'm just running away from the things that happened, from everything that came before. I've built this little life for myself here, but is it real, or am I just trying to escape?" Sophie smiled, the kind of smile that only a true friend could give, the one that made Emma feel like she was seen, really seen. Running away isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes you need to distance yourself from your old life to understand who you are now. It's like you're shedding old skin and growing into something new. The fact that you've made it this far, that you've embraced this adventure, that's real. Emma leaned back, allowing her thoughts to wander as she gazed out over the city below. Sophie was right, she hadn't run away. She had chosen this path. Every decision, every step she had taken since the breakup with Ryan had been an act of courage. She wasn't hiding, she was living. And the more she reflected on it, the more she realized that it was okay to embrace this change. The next few days were filled with talks about Emma's future, about what it would mean to live in Barcelona permanently. She visited a few apartments for rent, not seriously, just to see what was out there. She even explored job opportunities, just to see if it was a realistic option. There was something undeniably magical about the thought of staying, of weaving her life into the fabric of this city. On the final evening of Sophie's visit, they sat together in one of Emma's favorite spots by the beach, watching the waves crash against the shore. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Emma could feel the weight of her decision heavy in the air. "Whatever you decide, Sophie said, her voice full of understanding, "I know it's going to be the right choice for you. You've already shown how strong you are. Now, it's just about taking the leap." Emma nodded, her heart full of gratitude for her friend's support. She didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was finally on the edge of something real, something that could be hers. It was time to trust herself, to take that leap into the unknown, whatever it might bring. As Sophie left to catch her flight home, Emma found herself standing at the edge of a new horizon, ready to step forward into the next phase of her life. With Sophie back home, Emma found herself alone again, but this time, it wasn't the loneliness she had felt when she first arrived in Barcelona. The isolation had changed. It was no longer a place of sorrow or uncertainty, but a space of clarity. The city had become her second home, and for the first time in a long while, Emma was filled with excitement about the future. She had spent the last few weeks mulling over the idea of staying in Barcelona permanently. The thought had been daunting at first, like standing at the edge of a cliff, not knowing if the leap would take her to freedom or crash her into the jagged rocks below. But now, as she walked through the bustling streets, smelling the fresh bread baking in the local bakeries, hearing the lively chatter of the locals, and feeling the warmth of the sun on her face, she knew this was where she wanted to be. But there was one last thing Emma needed to confront before she could take the final step: herself. A week after Sophie's departure, Emma sat in her small apartment, staring out the window at the city below. She was sipping coffee, letting the warmth of the mug fill her hands as she thought deeply. She could feel the weight of her past still lingering, as it always would. The pain of the breakup with Ryan, the cruelty of his family, the months of questioning herself, it was all still there, tucked away in the corners of her mind. She hadn't let herself fully confront the reality of her feelings toward Ryan, not yet. She had been so focused on moving forward, on escaping the past, that she hadn't allowed herself to truly grieve for the loss of the life she thought she would have. It wasn't just about Ryan anymore. It was about everything that came with him, the future they had envisioned together, the family she had hoped to build, the plans that had once seemed so solid. Taking a deep breath, Emma pulled out her phone and stared at the text message Ryan had sent her weeks ago. She hadn't opened it since she'd replied with her decision to move on. She had done it out of necessity, out of self-preservation. But now, with time between her and that moment, she wondered if she should look at it again. For closure. For understanding. She tapped the message open, her finger hovering over the screen. "Ryan, I know it's been a while, but I've been thinking a lot about you lately. I know I messed up, and I can't stop regretting the way things ended. I miss you, Emma. I don't know what the future holds, but I'd like to talk if you're open to it." Emma closed her eyes for a moment, remembering his voice, the way he used to look at her with such love in his eyes. She had been in love with him, truly, and despite everything, part of her still cared about him. But that love, she realized, had become a part of her past, a chapter in a book that was now closed. She tapped on the screen to reply, but this time, her message was different. "Emma, Ryan, I've thought a lot about this, and I've realized something important. We were two people on different paths, and that's okay. I have no regrets about the time we shared, but I also know that I need to keep moving forward, without looking back. I hope you find what you're looking for. I'm finally at peace with my own journey." Her fingers hovered over the screen, her heart racing a little. This was final. There was no going back from this. After a long pause, Emma hit send. She felt a strange sense of calm wash over her, as though a weight had been lifted. She had made peace with everything Ryan, the past, the heartbreak. She was letting go, not out of anger, but out of understanding. The love she had for him had been real, but it was no longer enough to keep her tethered to a past that no longer served her. Now she was free. It was then that she made the final decision. Emma was going to stay in Barcelona. She was going to take the leap. The next few days were filled with action. Emma finalized the details for her extended visa, signed a lease for a small apartment in Elborn, the vibrant neighborhood she had fallen in love with. She applied for a few freelance photography gigs, convinced that she could make a living here while doing what she loved. She set up meetings with local creatives and photographers, eager to immerse herself even more deeply in the artistic community she had discovered. She began to plan her future with confidence, and every decision she made filled her with a sense of purpose. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't making choices out of fear or obligation. She was choosing because she wanted to, because it felt right. Her new life was unfolding before her, like a blank canvas, waiting to be filled with the colors of her dreams. One evening, as Emma sat in a cafe near the beach, sipping a glass of sangria and watching the sun dip below the horizon, she received a message from Sophie. "Soph, I saw your post today. You're really doing this, huh? I'm so proud of you, Em. You deserve all the happiness in the world." Emma smiled to herself as she read the message, feeling her heart swell with gratitude. Sophie had been there for her through everything, and she was right, Emma was really doing it. She had taken the leap, and though it was scary, she knew deep down that it was the right choice. As she looked out at the glowing skyline, Emma thought about all the things she had learned over the past few months. She had learned to trust herself, to honor her feelings, and to embrace the unknown with open arms. She had taken a chance on herself, and it felt like the most freeing decision of her life. The future was still uncertain, but one thing was clear: Emma was no longer afraid of it. She was ready for whatever came next. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?